Maryland men's basketball defeats Penn State 81-75. I'm Emmett Siegel here with Andrew Chodes at Xfinity Center. Instant reaction episode of the Testudo Talk podcast. Andrew, really exciting game today. I mean, you can't ask for much more from a Big Ten home opener in terms of entertainment. Got overtime, got some dramatics near the end of regulation. Maryland squeezes it out. Overall, first impressions of the game tonight?
Definitely exciting, but I think that a lot of the struggles for Maryland remained, especially on the offensive side. They ended up putting up 81 points, but it was definitely not a very efficient performance. I mean, shoot 5 of 25 from three. I mean, I think you mentioned their season average before this game was. I know you had it.
It was just above 22.6%. It's now down to, I believe, like 22.3 or so. They're the second worst by percentage. They're the second worst 3-point shooting team in
Yeah,
all of Division One.
not good. And they also, I mean, they shot 23 of 67 from the field, not great. I mean, where they won this game was at the free throw line. They got to the line 39 times. Basically, that was in large part to the amount of offensive rebounds they had. The reason they won this game is because they dominated the offensive glass. They were a plus 22 against Penn State, and Julian Reese, what performance, Emmett.
Yeah, I mean, Julian Reese dominated. Let me get the stat sheet real quick so I get the numbers right. Julian Reese, he played almost 42 minutes, had 24 points, 15 rebounds. He was just dominant. I mean, in the second half, especially, he was keeping the team in the game. I mean, I was saying it, during the game, and I stand by it. Julian Reese was the reason why they were in that game, the reason why they won this game tonight. He was outstanding. He drew 13 fouls. Kudus Wahab, back at the Xfinity Center after that, 1 year stint with Maryland.
He got some booze from he got some
Yeah, he got some booze. I'm not sure everyone here, all the students, totally knew who he was, but yeah, he fouled out with about 4 minutes left, and that was just kind of indicative of what Reese was doing. He was imposing his will down low. He was drawing fouls. He was getting a lot of offensive rebounds. He had 6 offensive rebounds. That's huge. Second chance points, for a team that was struggling to score on its first attempt. He was just, you can't say enough about him. And his free throw shooting is much
Yeah,
improved. You
really.
feel relatively confident with him going to the line now, which is something that you really couldn't have said at really any other point of his career except for his freshman year, which seems like a mile, years years ago now. When that was back when Kudus Wahab was his teammate. So, unbelievable performance from Julian Reese. Even though Jameer Young ended the day with 28 points, which led all scorers. This was Julian Reese is the reason why they won this game. This was his game today, and he proved why. We were talking about him before the season as an all Big Ten caliber forward. I mean, he showed why tonight. Even at Indiana, he wasn't overwhelmingly impressive, but I think to this point in the season, you have to say he's probably been their best player.
Yeah, no, and this game could have gotten out of hand early, right? I mean, it was just I think halfway through the first half, Penn State was up 11. They had a few 3-pointers that they missed, and Maryland slowly was able to come back into the game. They had a chance to take a lead into the half. They weren't able to do so, and then the second half, it was just really both teams got to the line. So I think there were over 52 fouls called in the game total. So, but again, Maryland, the slow starts are I think are still really concerning. In both the first and second half, they committed 4 turnovers in the first 5 minutes. So the offensive fluidity, the efficiency is still a major cause for concern. But ultimately, to get that first Big Ten victory is really, really important. But like you said, it was Julian Reese and Jameer Young. They were absolutely sensational tonight. They carried this team to victory. Jamie Kaiser Jr. also he was a nice spark off the bench for the Terps. I know Kevin Willard was really complimentary of his performance. 4 steals as well. Had a big three at the end of regulation. So definitely encouraging to see him, have some positive play.
Yeah. Jamie Kaiser was great. His defense technically could use a little bit of work, but at least he's hustling. He's got a lot of heart. You can see that. And when his shot is falling, he's a really key piece for this team that, like we said, really can't shoot the ball otherwise. But we have a positive reaction to this game because Maryland was able to win it in overtime. Really should have won it in regulation. We should talk about. I'll talk about that in a second. But
the actual game.
Yeah. I'll talk about the end of regulation in a second. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how the Big Ten standings are going to play out. No one does.
Yeah.
Anyone can beat anyone on any given night. You know that in the Big Ten. Especially the way it was last year. It looks like it's shaping up for a similar year where there's going to be upsets and everything like that. But this Penn State team is going to finish towards the bottom of the standings, you would have to think. And, Maryland needed overtime to beat them. So even though they get the win, now you get about a month or so before your next conference game against Purdue, I think it is, right? So that's, kind of the polar opposite of the conference in terms of expectations. You'll take the win, but it was not a pretty win. Kevin Willard had a funny quote where he says, "There is no joy" after the game.
I mean, we laugh, but I mean that's really telling for a coach to come out and say after a Big Ten win, there is no joy. I mean, it's a comment he'll probably end up regretting, just like the comment he made about some of his seniors that he ended up regretting. But I mean, he's got a point. I mean, it's just there's such a lack of efficiency right now. Defensively in the second half, they really took a step back as well. I don't know how much they allowed 41 points in the second half. So I mean, just overall, you get the win. You extend your winning streak at Xfinity Center to 16 games, which is pretty crazy to say out loud. But definitely still a
It's like
lot.
22 of 23 as
Yeah,
well because they had that one
yeah,
loss last year.
to UCLA. Yeah, but a lot of the questions we entered the game with kind of remain unanswered, if you will, a little bit. But I think now we can kind of talk how the game went specifically. I know you mentioned obviously those last few minutes. Jahari Long, tough few seconds for him, but
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's talk about the game and kind of the way it played out. We probably should have done that a little earlier,
yeah, sorry about that.
but yeah. I mean, it was Penn State. Came out on the front foot. Kind of asserted itself. Maryland hung around, went on a little bit of a run there. Later portion of the first half and was able to get a 2-point game at halftime. I think they took the lead at a point, or at least tied it up. And then the second half, it was kind of just blow for blow. It was slow with all the fouls and everything, but it was entertaining basketball. It was competitive. And then Maryland had it all but sealed. Julian Reese goes to the line, I believe, in a tie game. He's fouled, I said he was fouled 13 times today. That was not a rare occurrence. Goes to the line, misses the first, makes the second. It's 1-point game. And then Kanye Clary, who had an unbelievable game. I mean,
25.
yeah, Kanye Clary was outstanding for Penn State. He was their best player today. I mean, Ace Baldwin was really clutch, but Kanye Clary was their best player today. He goes down, misses the shot, rebound comes to Deshaun Harris-Smith, and he's fouled. He also goes 1 for 2, so it's a 2-point game. Maryland needs a stop, and they don't even really get an opportunity to do it.
Seconds left, I saw.
Yeah, about 4 seconds left. Maryland doesn't even really get the opportunity to get a stop because on the inbounds pass, Jahari Long gets called for a reach in, and then Ace Baldwin goes down with the wall in his face and everything, and just calmly knocks down the free throws. Maryland had a look at the end. Jameer Young had a floater, comes up short. You go to overtime, and then Penn State didn't make a field goal in overtime. Maryland really kind of commanded overtime, but this game should have been wrapped up in regulation. Maryland should have won the game. That's certainly something that you got to clean up. You could see right when it happened. Jahari Long, kind of didn't know what to do with himself. Yeah. Kevin Willard just staring him down. There's obviously a lot of frustration, but Maryland definitely should have won this game in regulation. You win in overtime, so it kind of you forget about that a little bit. No one will really remember that. But if you had lost that game in regulation, I mean, what a disaster that could have been.
Yeah, no, we talked about Jahari Long, and I really don't want to do this, and to single out players, but I do think we kind of have to. Dante Scott, obviously, he had a really rough showing at Indiana. He was seemingly called out by Willard, and then he starts today with 0 for 8 from the field. He was hearing it from the fans loudly. On a personal level, I think you obviously feel really bad for the guy. I mean, he looked lost on the offensive end, losing a lot of confidence, but it was encouraging to see. He came with some really big boards towards the end of regulation and in overtime. Gets that big N1, doesn't convert on the free throw, but still, I mean, when you look at a fifth-year senior that is supposed to be a surefire starter and a solid contributor, and he starts the game 0 for 8, and he just looked.
The body language was not encouraging at all. Even when he got the N1, like you talk about, he made another tough shot as well. He finished with 10 rebounds. I mean, it was a pretty poor offensive showing from him, but overall, not a bad one. But just the body language. I mean, his teammates were fired up when he had that N1, and he was just stoic.
I think that was
kind of 1,000-yard stare.
It was. He gets the big N1, and this is a guy who's a lead, and he's going through a lot when you have the crowd on you the entire time, which sucks. But I mean, Jamie Kaiser, the freshman, is all pumped up after the N1, goes to give him a hug, and Dante Scott kind of just looks into the abyss like, this game, this sucked for me, and you feel bad for him, obviously on a personal level, but it's a concern, right? I mean, your fifth-year senior starter at the small forward position, he needs to get it going, and for Maryland fans, hopefully he can do that.
Yeah, and luckily, you have a little bit of a stretch coming up here where you have an opportunity to do that. I mean, you got Alcorn State, Nicholls State before you have to go to UCLA, and then you got Coppin State, mixed in there before you have that Purdue game. So, you have an opportunity to get some wins, maybe fix some things. Even though we said that, before their last homestand, they didn't really fix everything. You have an opportunity coming up. Dante Scott's going to need to, pick it up. This team is, going to go as far as it wants to. But luckily, like we said, you got that performance from Julian Reese, Jamie Kaiser, huge spark off the bench. I do want to talk about the and one from Deshaun Harris-Smith in overtime.
Yeah.
I mean, that was huge. We've talked a little bit about the freshmen and how they maybe haven't been up to snuff totally, at least through the first 8 games. Obviously growing pains. You're a freshman. We knew there was going to be struggles, but they were just kind of a symptom of the offensive struggles. Yeah. And then Jamie has 10 points today, but then Deshaun Harris-Smith with maybe the biggest bucket of the day, at least the one that got the biggest reaction.
And he was struggling offensively the entire game.
He wasn't taking a lot of shots.
He was, and he was also he had a really tough. I mean, I know Willard, mentioned this. He had a tough assignment. You're basically he played a lot of minutes. I don't know the exact. I just hit you in the face. I'm sorry. The exact he played
35 minutes, almost 36
so 30
minutes.
so 36 minutes basically for a freshman year guarding Ace Baldwin, an experienced guy, obviously a star at VCU for almost the entirety of that game. And then when push comes to shove, Deshaun gets that big bucket late. So I think that does so much for his confidence. Obviously his shot, his offensive production there's a lot of work there, but still encouraging to see him, make a big play towards the end of the game. He got the rebound, which got off the free throw line. He made 1 and 2, but still, the confidence is really important for the young guys. And I'll give a little bump. I don't know if you guys too. We had our Testudo Talk crossover pod on the Under the Shell podcast. I mentioned how, despite their struggles, I really wasn't concerned about the freshmen's play. I think it was kind of more so a byproduct of the offense as a whole, and I think they'll be really important cogs, going forward. More so Jamie Kaj on the offensive end, but for Maryland fans out there, I really would not be concerned about DHS or Jimmy Kaiser. I think they're going to be really solid players. I think they're going to be important players going forward.
Yeah, well, I do want to talk specifically about the play, though, the and one. The shot clock was winding down. There's about 40 seconds left in overtime. I think it's a 1-point game. So you're looking at potentially another opportunity, even though Penn State had gotten nothing going in overtime. You give them the ball back. They got players. They got Clary. They got Baldwin. They have some other guys that hit some big shots. I mean, you're looking at giving them the ball back with a chance to win it potentially, and you never want that in an overtime game that's been so back and forth. And Jameer Young, they give the ball to Jameer Young. Like I said, shot clock's winding down. The ball's even gotten inside the 3-point arc. And then just a beautiful pinpoint pass. DHS is cutting from the corner towards the hoop, through 2 defenders, catches him right in stride, and he finishes through contact, which we know is his strength. I mean, Jameer Young had 28 points today, led the offense, but it really is telling when your graduate guard is willing to give up the ball in that situation, is willing to make the play to get the better look instead of giving himself the look. I mean, that just kind of says it all. Jameer Young is such an amazing leader for this team, and such a steady presence that without him, without Julian, this team would be completely lost. And it's good to see that, even in those big moments, the crowd's getting into it. Obviously he's played in that, environment before. It wasn't, like the most unbelievable environment ever, but it's still, a tense game. You need a win. Just to see him kind of be willing to give up the ball there was really telling for me, and kind of just embodied, what he means to his team, and, the performance he put forth in a game that, this is a must-win game. And even though it took a full 45 minutes, even more than the usual 40, they got the job done. And, it's because of Jameer Young and Julian Reese primarily.
Yeah, no, I think just to kind of try to explain just how important Jameer Young and Julian Reese were both in this game. I mean, Penn State really, for the first 14 minutes of the game, really dominated, and it was Jameer Young and Julian Reese, kind of that 1-2 combo, just pounding it inside, drawing fouls, getting to the line. Jameer Young finished 12 of 12 from the free throw line. So important. Obviously, Julian Reese got to the line 15 times, but the 2 of them, Reese had 15 rebounds. Jameer had 8 rebounds. So just all around game, the 2 of them were both absolutely sensational.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to get in before we go?
I think Maryland's fortunate for what their upcoming home schedule looks like, with 3 ball games that they should win. I think the UCLA game in LA might be a little might be a tough watch, but maybe the team can get a boost from a big win.
Yeah, the team last year was able to gather those non-conference wins. It didn't drop its in-season tournament, stuff like that. But we saw last year this team, win an NCAA tournament game despite not really being able to win on the road. As long as you can hold serve at home, their next home game against a conference opponent is against Purdue. That's a tough matchup. Purdue looks like one of the best teams in the country again. But as long as you can hold serve at home, be able to win these games, I'm not sure this performance beats anyone else in the conference, but it beat the team in front of you. Mm-hmm. At this point, I think this was just, you can't emphasize how important this win was for this team.
This win.
Because, if you start 0-2 in Big Ten play and then you have a month to think about it, that's just catastrophic. A lot of people in the first half, I was seeing, social media is obviously gonna bring out, some of the extremes, but even then I'm seeing in the mentions, people talking about, the program's dead and, I'm never watching this team or whatever. And then, they win in overtime and everyone's kind of happy.
He's back.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of see the switch flip. That stuff does matter. Obviously like like I said, like this wasn't like a vintage Xfinity Center environment, but like if you got to keep the fans in it,
Yeah.
you got to make sure that you keep that home court advantage going. And today this is a game that they don't win on the road, and they don't win probably against any other team. This was the perfect time for them to have a performance like this to get a win. But you got a lot of things to clean up, as we head in. They have now 6 days off until their next game. You're probably going to beat Alcorn State. If you don't, then it doesn't matter what you did in this game.
Yeah,
They're going to beat Alcorn State, but regardless, this you can't overemphasize just how important this stretch is before they get into Big Ten only games. You got to start stacking wins here, and
Yeah.
you got to make sure that you're working through things so you're peaking at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to get the Big Ten win is huge, and now you have almost a month off until your next Big Ten game. But yeah, huge win. Wasn't pretty, but a much needed victory, and they were able to pull it out.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for listening. We always appreciate it so much. We talked a little bit about the bowl game selection on the Under the Shell podcast. We would recommend that if you want to hear
Yeah,
our thoughts on that you go and listen to that. That's on testudotimes.com and on the Under the Shell feed as well. That was a lot of fun.
yeah.
But here on the Testudo Talk podcast, until the bowl game comes up,
Yeah,
I think it's going to be mostly basketball talk. We're going to be here at Xfinity Center for pretty much every game and covering the team. Andrew, sign us off.
yeah. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be live from the Music City in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. See you guys then.